Good evening, members. I make it 6 o'clock, so we'll make a start on this meeting, and welcome to this meeting of White Forest District Council. This meeting is being held remotely and is available to stream from the Council's live meeting stream channel. We'll go straight on to agenda item 1. These are prayers to be read by Reverend Robert Legg, Team Vicar, Kidderminster East. Reverend Robert Legg.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you and to be leading prayers from the relative comfort and security of the vicarage front rooms. So it's lovely to see you, and thank you for what you're all doing as councillors at this difficult time. So we'll begin our meeting with prayer. Let's all pray. God of justice and mercy, we thank you for the gift of life and for the privilege and the opportunity to serve the people of Wyre Forest, especially in this current situation. And so help us all to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and with goodwill. May we speak with charity and with restraint. Give us a spirit of service, reminding us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders that your people need. Help us to see the humanity, the integrity, and the dignity of those who may disagree with us, and to treat all persons with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of our calling. We ask this as your sons and your daughters, confident in your goodness and love. Amen. Let's all say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. All the best for the meeting, and I hope that everything goes well tonight. Thank you once again for what you're doing.
Thank you, Robert. I know you've got another video meeting to go to, so thank you very much for joining us today. Members, before we move on to apologies, I ought to remind members how the meetings are conducted. You will all be familiar now, but can I ask all members to keep their devices on mute unless they are speaking? If you wish to speak, then you will need to use your virtual hand on your device to speak. And to help me call the names of the speaker is Mike Parker. Also, when we come to voting, you will be asked to raise your hand so that it's clearly visible to the officers. And as we go along, I'll guide you about how we do things, because it can be difficult to keep up with these sorts of things. So on to agenda item 2. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, any declarations of interest by members? No hands have gone up, and therefore there are no declarations of interest. Agenda item 4, these are for the minutes on the 20th of February 2020, 26th of February 2020, and the extraordinary meeting on the 21st of April 2020. Could I have a mover for that? Councillor Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I move all 3 lots of minutes on block? And members have them, and they are available obviously on our website. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oborski.
Pleased to be able to second the 3 lots of minutes, Chair.
Thank you. Members, if you could just raise your hands to confirm that I can sign these minutes as a true and accurate record. Louisa, are you happy with that?
Yes, I've got all that, thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I've got all that, thank you.
Thank you. On to agenda item 5. Do we have any public participation? I think the answer is no. We'll move on to questions. No questions have been submitted in accordance with standing orders. Agenda item 7 are my communications, the chairman's communications, which are on page 44. And clearly COVID-19 has had a massive effect on what all dignitaries across our district have been able to do since lockdown. And of course, which has meant that there has been an impact on our charities that we have been fundraising for. And if any member or member of the public wishes to donate to charities, please get in touch with the relevant dignitary. That's either myself or the mayors or staff or Julian Kidminster. Agenda item 8, leader of the council announcements, Councillor Graham Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will have had the detailed note from me earlier on this afternoon. It is available on website. It's about 5 paragraphs. I'm happy to move that. It obviously focuses on various issues that have been key to us all in recent months, and that will be picked up in a moment by the notice of motion. And obviously it's that situation that's colleagues continue to read about messages and thanks and tributes to staff that we have all the time and appear in our Wired Weekly journal. The initial view of the financial impact is something which we're keeping up to date on from our finance director, Tracy Southall. And to be candid, it's difficult to know if the government do not meet the bulk of the extra costs that we're incurring. We, like other authorities, are going to be in big trouble as the year moves on, but we can only just operate on a day-to-day basis at the moment. And it would be difficult to think of anything happening in the long term without additional funding. We're going to commence discussions again soon with the town councils about the localism issue, and we hope they will continue to be successful as they already are. We are aware that some of the discretionary services will be ceasing or being significantly reduced. The probability is that localism will have to move faster and that town councils will have to make a greater financial contribution to our services if they're going to continue in the medium-term financial strategy. Discussion among the Worcestershire leaders has already focused on how councils can best support the economic recovery of the county, as Worcestershire as a whole. The economic impact is severe, with some projections suggesting a contraction in GVA of 35% or more. It would be rash to suggest that we can recover from that sort of a hit swiftly. So to be realistic, local government is going to be in a difficult time for a long period ahead. Working with our local enterprise partnerships and other partners, we will need to focus on those interventions that might have the biggest impact. Our own corporate leadership team, our Chief Executive Ian Miller and the directors are working on a recovery plan for our council and the services, but taking into account the flurry of guidance that come in on a daily basis from central government, which are often contradicted the following day, it's a bit of a nightmare, and I don't know how they manage to do that to keep up with the current situation. And that's only happened again this week since the Prime Minister's statement on Sunday. There's been various guidance papers that have been issued. The current working from home is going to continue for the foreseeable future, and we're going to look at the best way forward to help protect the health of staff and their loved ones at home. And we've got many of our staff doing that and doing it very successfully. We hope that continues. The Prime Minister work from home if you can, but you can go to work if you can't from home. And the position adopted in our authority is consistent with that. Likewise, the guidance may mean that will be a considerable time before we can revert to face-to-face meetings for councillors. But Mr. Chairman, this is going very well. We're all getting better at using these facilities, and we do have some successful meetings. So I think that's all I would want to say, but it's a changing situation by the minute, and we just look for our own council updates. So we're all kept in the picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ballinger. On to agenda item 9. This is a motion. We have one motion. In a moment, I'm going to ask Councillor Hart to move his motion. Then what I would like is for the seconder to raise his hand or to indicate that he wishes to speak. It may be helpful, Councillor Hart, if you could indicate who the seconder might be. It might help me to call that member. So we have one notice of motion from Council. Councillor Marcus Hart.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and good evening, Council. I did indicate that Councillor Desmond would be seconding the motion to officers yesterday, and indeed his blue hand is already raised, Chairman. So perhaps if you go to Councillor Desmond and he will formally second. So can I formally move the notice of motion, but not the notice of motion that is written in the printed agenda? Can I give notice formally that I wish to amend the written notice of motion in order that just paragraphs 1 and 2 form the notice of motion. Paragraphs 3, 4, 5 and 6 are to be deleted. And can I make it perfectly clear that I'm very grateful to the leader and the actions taken to resolve that matter, which has led to me not needing to move the notice of motion as originally tabled, and I will say no more about that matter, and I'm grateful to those involved in respect of getting us to this position. So just in case any of the viewers at home do not have a copy of the agenda in the normal way, the notice of motion reads as follows. This council resolves to publicly congratulate all of our outstanding NHS staff, frontline key workers, performing a wide variety of roles, including shop workers and our wider public sector workers, including fire, police, ambulance and teachers. All of those involved in local government in delivering essential frontline services, working in collaboration and having a multi-agency approach. They all deserve our grateful thanks. The council further thanks in particular each and every one of our staff, from whichever team, front-facing or back office, uniting to work as one council for the greater good of our whole community of Wyre Forest, in ensuring that such things as our bins are emptied, our streets are swept, our public open space kept safely open, residents being able to get vital assistance with benefits, grants and loans, not only in respect of the coronavirus pandemic, but also as a result of the unprecedented flooding incident back in February. And of course, that our democracy can continue with virtual council meetings. To you all, this council says thank you. And I think, Mr. Chairman, it is vitally important as democratically elected members, we demonstrate to our communities that we are leading and that this authority is leading from the front. I don't want to single out a single staff member or a single team, because there are just so many different teams within our district council that are all working exceptionally hard. And, you know, it's important that we recognise our back office functions as importantly as our frontline services, because we would not be able to have democracy in action like this. Who would have thought that all 33 councillors would be able to participate in a meeting from the comfort of our own bedrooms or studies or offices, and indeed that the public can watch it live. It would have been unheard of a few years ago. So that the fact that we can all still connect with our communities is absolutely vital. I've seen, and I'm not singling out teams, but I give some practical examples of the gratitude that I've seen on social media towards our dustbin men, for example. I've seen our percentage attendances of our staff members as they've been set out in Wild Weekly in the update that we have had from the Chief Executive. And it is fantastic to say that we have been able to keep the machinery of local government providing those frontline services day in, day out, week in, week out, since these restricting measures came in on the 23rd of March. And as of today, of course, with more people being allowed to visit open spaces and parks and sit on benches, there's going to be even more to do. I outlined our other key public sector workers, and let's put front and centre the very brave and bold efforts of our nurses and our doctors, and not just the clinicians in our hospitals, but all of them that administer them and keep them clean and provide meals for patients. All of the unsung heroes within the NHS who perhaps, you know, are really not front and centre of people's minds. And frankly, we should also not forget social care, because those working in social care are often simply not in the same type of jobs and positions as doctors and nurses, and the bravery that they have shown and that healthcare assistants have shown to protect our vulnerable and our elderly at this difficult time. Mercifully, the R rate, as it is known, is going down, and it's going in the right direction. And mercifully, Worcestershire and Wyre Forest has not been affected as much as greater urban centres. And for that, we should be grateful, but of course, not complacent. And it is absolutely right that we lead from the front and show responsibility in terms of social distancing. And of course, importantly, that not only do we thank our NHS, I mentioned police, fire and ambulance, and indeed teachers. There are, of course, so many other people that you could name, those who are working in our supermarkets, at the tills and stacking our shelves, all of those in the supply and delivery chain, our postman or post lady for bringing us our post. It seems old-fashioned to communicate through the post, but actually people actually sitting down now, they've got time to write a letter or a card, a note in manuscript, and that smiley face from the postman or post lady, and that human interaction that in fact so many of our elderly and vulnerable people, they see so few people, so it's really important. And the good old community spirit. It's quite ironic that this pandemic has occurred at a time when our nation was celebrating VE Day on the 8th of May last week. And I think it was Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, who said a few weeks ago that this pandemic, this coronavirus, is a different enemy, an enemy that we can't see. 75 years ago, we knew how to fight our enemy because we could see them. And the great national spirit in the way that the public have respected, and by and large, the overwhelming majority, the 99.9% of us as a public who have behaved responsibly to abide by the lockdown and restriction measures to protect everybody in our society, and we should congratulate that and congratulate all of our Wyre Forest residents. Our Chancellor of the Exchequer has indicated that there are going to be bleak financial times ahead, and we are frankly already in recession, and we spare a thought for all of our businesses in Wyre Forest. Debenhams not reopening, Frankie and Benny's not reopening, and I suspect there will be a whole host of other businesses that really struggle as a result of this, and this is when I'm pleased I'm the leader of the opposition and don't have to face this as leader of the council, because we know how difficult it is to get town centres regenerated and become vibrant. And in fact, we've seen an even greater seismic shift to online shopping and online deliveries and online behaviour, and I think that is only going to make it even more difficult for our high streets. I won't stray into another agenda item, which is later on, but suffice to say, I congratulate all of our frontline workers, and also finally, of course, because we drifted from one really poor situation in our district to another, and we shouldn't forget the flooding. And it hasn't paled into insignificance. It feels like it has a little bit too, as a result of the pandemic, but those people affected by flooding in Bewdley, Stourport, and to a much lesser extent, I accept, in Wolverley Village, went from one problem to another. And we should give our grateful thanks to our officers for getting out the literally thousands of pounds in flooding grants and thousands of pounds to our less well-off households in terms of council tax reduction scheme, and in terms of businesses and the grants that we've been able to passport on as a result of the substantial financial assistance that we've now been given by central government. So from me, Chairman, as the proposer of the notice of motion, on behalf of myself and the Conservative group, because it is on behalf of them as well, I commend this notice of motion to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. We'll go to Councillor Nathan Desmond. Councillor Desmond, are you there?
Tell him to unmute himself, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Councillor Desmond, you're on mute.
Is that
Here
better?
we go.
Yeah. Oh, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Council. Can you hear me now? And apologies for that.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm delighted to formally second the motion as Councillor Hart set out, which obviously pays a heartfelt tribute to the many workers across a number of different sectors carrying out vital and urgent work in the fight against COVID-19. I'll start off by saying, Mr. Chairman, that those in the medical profession, those who are on the front line and who are having to deal with the very real effects of this devastating virus, we absolutely salute you and eternally grateful for all your professionalism and dedication and self-sacrifice that they do day in and day out. The pressure and the worry of those doctors, nurses, etc., trying to save lives while in a very hostile environment where they, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, could catch this deadly virus at any moment is immense. And that's why all of us are extremely grateful because of their bravery and self-sacrifice. My sister, Mr. Chairman, actually works at the ICU at Worcester Royal Hospital. And obviously we've had video conferences with her over the weeks, and the worry for her own husband and her children every time Karen goes to work is absolutely huge and immense. And, you know, it's issues like that, you know, what we tend to forget is that the worry of the families behind the doctors and the nurses that we need to, you know, uphold and respect as well. And, you know, to all of those in the NHS doing a whole myriad of different services, whether you're a doctor, nurse, cleaner, in the kitchen, who are working tirelessly, you know, you are absolutely our heroes, and we are exceptionally proud and grateful for your continued dedication. It's only right, Mr. Chairman, that we also thank all those other key workers who ensure that the infrastructure of our daily lives continue. And as Councillor Hart rightly sets out, there's a whole myriad of people across a number of different sectors that we must applaud. And obviously, you know, the number of workers and volunteers, for example, in the distribution and production of food, ensuring that this nation keeps on eating. We are, you know, immensely grateful for that help and dedication, and all those in all the other key services, from the police to the fire to the postal services, you know, to keep our communities together. We also say a big heartfelt thank you. And we also must recognise the absolute dedication and professionalism that we have in our own staff here at Wyre Forest, right across the board. You know, they're all doing an absolutely fantastic job in keeping our frontline services right going. As Councillor Hart said, you know, the admiration from the public right across Wyre Forest is heartfelt, and it's profound as well, right across social media, speaking to various people online, you know, in the street, that the appreciation of our own staff is quite immense. And, you know, I've spoken to a lot of businesses right across Wyre Forest, and in particular that the way we dished out the business grants to thousands of small businesses, the £10,000 grant from government. I think we were one of the fastest authorities in the West Midlands to dish out in the region of £17 million in record time. Is a fantastic effort that, you know, we applaud all those you know, that have helped underneath Tracy, you know, in getting that money out to businesses, which is the lifeblood of businesses. It's only £10,000, but to many businesses, that £10,000 has been absolutely vital in allowing them to continue, you know, over the next couple of months at least. So, you know, we are exceptionally grateful for that. Obviously, it is exceptionally worrying times now. It'll be exceptionally worrying times in the future. And it is that community spirit and that community cohesion that is helping services obviously keep going. And, you know, everybody is pulling together to get through this profound and most difficult, challenging time. So I'm delighted, Mr. Chairman, to formally second the motion as printed, and I certainly salute all those across all sectors who are doing an absolutely fantastic job. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. The motion is therefore the first two paragraphs as printed. Mike, can we go to the next speaker, please, if there is one?
Yes, Chairman, Councillor Helen Dyke.
Thank you. I hope that the mover and seconder of the motion will indulge me. Would they please be happy to add volunteers to that particular motion? I know we've talked about community spirit and community cohesion, but I do think that volunteers should be named in their own right. One only has to see social media, look at television items, listen to the radio, and volunteers of all sort of types have played a major part in this, from delivering food boxes to people that couldn't get out, to fetching prescriptions, sorting medication out. And I would just, whilst I support the motion 100% and what's been said so far, I actually would ask if Councillor Hart and Councillor Desmond would include volunteers in the motion itself.
Thank you. Councillor Hart will come back on summarising, but we'll go to the speakers first of all, and then come back to that, Councillor Dyke. So next speaker, please.
Councillor Luillier.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Council and members of the public. I think Councillor Hart and Desmond have both echoed all of our thoughts in their praise for the heroic efforts of all of our NHS staff and all frontline workers and council workers who are keeping our communities and this country going through this crisis. Really, I just want to add my personal thanks to the amazing staff in our care homes. My mum was moved into a care home a few weeks before lockdown. And like many homes, they suffered losses due to COVID-19. And my family sees on a daily basis how they're battling to keep the virus at bay, a challenge that must at times feel like trying to hold back the tide. These wonderful people put themselves and their families at risk to be there for our loved ones, to hold their hands and to reassure them when we can't. And for that and for all their tireless efforts, I just want to offer my heartfelt thanks. And can I also add how pleased I am to hear that an enhanced testing regime for all staff and residents in care homes is being introduced. That's got to be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, Mike.
Councillor Edgington White.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman, members of the Council and members of the public. I just want to endorse everything that's been said. The motion is well stated. The additions, I hope, for the voluntary people. I really appreciate Anna introducing her personal experience of care homes, because having experienced care homes dilemmas with two of my relatives now deceased in the last 3 years, I have been very conscious of what they must be going through. I only wanted to speak to obviously put my heartfelt thanks to the way in which the community has responded. I think it's brought our communities together. There is a tremendous amount of gratitude, but I just wanted to share one little comment that I had in an email from someone locally who was responding to something else. And she said, the girls are homeschooling effectively. The schools have been amazing. And I think we have to realise, just like our officers, all the people that are home working and keeping our country going and keeping services going day to day, which is much more challenging to be doing things at home with your own families there as well. So that just brought home to me that there are so many people in our community that are doing an amazing job, and we need to applaud all of them.
Thank you, Councillor Edgington White. Next speaker, please, Mike.
Councillor Onslow.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, and good evening to any members of the public listening. Councillor Dyke, as she so often does, has stolen my thunder, because it was absolutely around the volunteers that I was going to just give them a mention. I know there's been some fantastic work done, and I've been linked in with one of the local, obviously Kidderminster ones for my area, and they've done some just amazing work. And I was only speaking to them today really about, because it is quite a long haul, and I know people signed up initially and perhaps thought it was going to be a couple of weeks and it'd all be over and we'd be back to normal. And once you're sort of getting into your 7th and 8th week, it can be quite hard going. But I've been assured today that volunteers are just as enthusiastic today as they were at the start, which is absolutely brilliant. So wanted to put out my thanks to them, and really a plea to all of us, just, you know, as the motion alluded to, it is about working together. It isn't about, you know, holding up one particular thing over another as something one person's done or another. Absolutely about working together. So obviously fully support the motion and Councillor Dyke's amendment to add in volunteers.
Thank you, Councillor Onslow. Next speaker, please, Mike.
Councillor Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity. Congratulate Councillor Hart on the fullness of his motion. I think it covered everything from all the people and the groups that we'd want to respond to, with the addition of the few that other members have mentioned. I think the dilemma is going to be, Chairman, for the councils like ours and hospitals like the Royal in Worcester and the Redditch Alexander hospitals, that when it comes to looking at your traditional performance during the year, and yesterday, Southampton, the big hospital there, the general, the infirmary, whatever, they said they've had a dilemma because they've been looking at this stuff. They wanted to know who they were going to nominate as the nurse of the year. The matron, or the chief executive there, came up with a conclusion that couldn't do it this year, but they were going to do a multiple award ceremony and give a nurse of the year to every member of their staff. Now, I think, Chairman, that would be the sort of situation that our hospitals will probably have, because we all hear of stories every day that are happening that are down to individual members and whatever. But it'll be the same with Wyre Forest, because as you pointed out, Councillor Hart, that it's a lot of the backroom people. I'm not going to start pointing to different teams, and we all know those that have been up front and have delivered things, and we've got great record of achieving in that. But it's down to all of the staff across the whole of the authority, because they've all gone that extra mile for us, and we appreciate that. And thanks to them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ballinger. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Hart and Desmond said, and everybody else summed it up perfectly. I just wanted to praise our incredible community in the Wyre Forest. It's been quite humbling. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was working in education, had recently just gone into supply, but then lost that job when the school shut. So sort of for 4 weeks, I was not working, and really privileged to be part of seeing the work that was going on in the areas. Obviously, we won't single out person, but there is one member who I think needs an incredible shout out, and that is Dale, who set up the coronavirus support group. He is literally, him and his own leaders have coordinated the project off the whole of the Wyre Forest. And as a volunteer, as Councillor Onslow rightly said, it's been a privilege actually to see the community come together, and the kindness and the sort of the food banks, the work obviously that our council have done is incredible, goes without saying, frontline and in the office, but sort of the support groups, the food banks, the people, our charity feeding the homeless and the needy, their remit is changing on a daily basis, where people are losing jobs. People had weeks of wondering if they were going to be furloughed. So now after 4 weeks, I'm now from a personal point of view, I've shifted from an education worker to a care worker, now working in a children's home. And I just wanted to, reiterate what everyone is doing. And actually, I just wanted to say a massive well done to the parents. I'm quite glad in some ways my children are all grown up, but for you to keep your children at home for now, what is 7 weeks, and now being faced with the worry, do you send your primary children back to school, do you not? I know the teachers and my teacher friends are all very concerned as well at the moment as to whether it is too soon. And I just wanted to say an incredible well done to our whole community for pulling together, everybody. The supermarkets are doing just the best job, and just to thank everyone and just to stay safe. And we have the best community in the Wyre Forest, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Borski.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Council, and good evening if we are now broadcasting on YouTube, because I think there was a bit of a snag at the beginning. Thanks to Councillor Helen Dyke for her mini amendment and for Marcus for taking it on board. I have the privilege, and it really is a privilege, of having my 2 phone numbers listed as the contacts for the wonderful Kidderminster Coronavirus Volunteer Support Group, set up, as Susie said, by Dale Priest-Kelly. And grateful thanks to the Police and Crime Commissioner, and particularly to Tracy as his deputy, and to Kidderminster Town Council for helping us to make sure that all our 275 plus volunteers in Kidderminster actually have photo ID cards, so that when when they go out to get prescriptions or shopping or for anybody, they are able to prove who they are when they go to the door. And also grateful thanks to the lovely people who are running equivalent schemes in both Bewdley and Stourport. As has been said, the community really has come together. Individual streets have set up WhatsApp groups. Individual people have done amazing fundraising things just because they realized they could. And I think that's been really heartening. Also really proud to see the NHS flag flying at Wyre Forest House and the wonderful banners that Steve Brandt has organised for the sides of our refuse trucks, which is really going to be something that is really noticed by the district. As many of you may know, I was at one time Polish Honorary Consul, and for the last 5 years since I ceased to be consul, there's been an empty flagpole in the front garden. I'm now absolutely delighted to have been able to get a thank you NHS and the Rainbow Carers flag up on that. There are people putting banners up on their walls, thanking individual people. I think that, as has been said, we really have proved as a community what an absolutely fantastic community we have here in Wyre Forest. And I'm sure that a lot of the people who've come together to do things now are going to want to stay together doing things into the future. I think, you know, streets that have set up WhatsApp groups, all sorts of things. There's so much going on in our community that we as councillors in some ways are proud to be involved in leading, but in other ways are proud to be able to go along and help those who are actually taking the lead in doing things. So it's a big thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Borski. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Are you there, Lee?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was waiting for you to introduce me. Good evening, Council, and to members of the public. I don't propose to go over what has already been said. We obviously agree with everything that has been said. What I would say, though, is in relation to some other key workers, I just jotted down a few others that haven't been mentioned yet. And those are often forgotten. Some of these are often forgotten. So paramedics, scientists, lab technicians, porters, and we've already touched on it. Several of the members have already touched on it. The volunteers in our community. I find it really, really encouraging that there's been an absolute shift in community spirit over the last few weeks. And I think with time, people have actually been speaking to their neighbours and taken the time to, obviously at distance, have conversations with people when they've been out walking more. And there's much more of a more positive feeling when you're out and about. Our message on behalf of the Labour Group to the key workers is that to all the protectors risking their lives to protect us, we would like to say that a huge heartfelt thank you on behalf of the Labour Group, and that's really it from me. Everything's been said. Other members have said that, so we agree, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. For some reason, I lost connection there, but I will pick up what you said. Next speaker, please, Mike.
Councillor Martin.
Good evening, Council, Chairman and members of the public, if you're able to be with us. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Hart and Councillor Desmond. I think, like everybody said, I think you've said it all. Apart from, and I was mindful when Marcus said that he didn't necessarily want to single everybody out, because we want to thank everybody equally. But from a personal point of view, I would like to thank the homeless team, because as and when we start to unlock and we come out of all this, their job is going to be just as hard, because obviously all the accommodation with using hotels and things like that, they're going to want their accommodation back. So their job will continue to help our vulnerable. And I'd also like to mention my fellow colleagues in the prison service. They're having a hard job daily. with new receptions and testing and people not wanting to, you know, quite have that understanding. So personally, I'd also like to send my support and thanks to the prison service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no other speakers, so I'm going to come back to Councillor Hart to summarise. But I think the first thing, Councillor Hart, is whether you will agree with Councillor Dyke to include volunteers and what the wording should be for that. Perhaps you can deal with that as well as summarising.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed, and thank you members for all of those very supportive contributions. Firstly, on the wording of the notice of motion and Councillor Helen Dyke's very sensible proposal, what I would suggest is in the first paragraph, after the word teachers, is simply insert 4 words, which is and all community volunteers. And I think that way it keeps it very simple. So if everyone is happy, and I know that my seconder will be, that I simply insert and all community volunteers after the word teachers, then there's a full stop, and it continues, and all of those involved in local government, etc. And can I apologise that I perhaps should have name-checked our voluntary and community sector specifically. It certainly wasn't a deliberate slight or oversight, because frankly, the statutory sector, in whatever part of the statutory sector, simply could not have done this alone. There's been a huge community spirit across the whole of the Wyre Forest. Chairman, I spoke at length when I moved the notice of motion. There have been a number of contributions. As a judge would say to me if I was making such a lengthy closing speech, you're now gilding the lily, Mr. Hart, and you're pushing at a door that is already open. So I will stop there and commend this notice of motion to the virtual chamber, Chairman.
Indeed, thank you, Councillor Hart. So members, we're now going to vote. The motion is the first 2 paragraphs as written, with the amendment to include volunteers, as Councillor Hart has noted. All those in favour, please raise your hand so they can be seen clearly.
That's unanimous.
Okay, so that's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much for that. We're on to agenda item 10, urgent motions. I understand that there are no urgent motions. If that could be confirmed.
Confirmed, Chairman.
Thank you. On to agenda item.
Chairman, Councillor Ballinger has indicated he wishes to speak.
No, sorry, Chairman, I must have pressed the wrong. I was trying to get the hand ready to the next bit. Sorry.
Well, here we are, Councillor Ballinger. Municipal calendar 2021. Council is invited to approve the municipal calendar for 2021, and for that I call Councillor Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman. I was a little premature with a digit. Can I just move that? There's a lot of hard work gone into that with the committee staff, and let's hope it can go through unanimously. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, and then to second that, Councillor Oborski.
Happy to second it.
Thank you. Are there any speakers on this item?
Got nobody indicating, Chairman.
Thank you. So again, members, if you could raise your hand to indicate that calendar is approved. Okay.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 12, members, annual reports for the municipal year for 2019-20. The way I'd like to do this is I'm going to ask for the relevant member to present his report. I will then ask whether any members have any questions on those reports, and then I will take them on block to see if they can be agreed. First item then, Cabinet report, Councillor Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman, members. The report is pages 61 and 62 on your bundle of papers for this evening's meeting. It's covered our first year as the administration. It's been an interesting time and a very enjoyable time from the group of politicians that have come together and doing something, many of us for the first time, in terms of our activities for the District Council, but it's been very enjoyable. We've had extensive experience between us. A lot of people have been on the council before. And, you know, overall, we believe we bring in a new flavour to the council. We work well, we believe, with the previous administration, who had stood fast over a number of years, and I can't criticise them in any way for the reductions that they made, because they've been under considerable pressure at the time from central government, and the problems that we've had and will have to battle with will now be compounded by the latest financial crisis. It will only get worse. It's been very busy for the District Council for the year. In September, our new corporate plan was agreed by the council, which sets out our vision and priorities for the district over the next 4 years. Corporate plan was produced following a public consultation where there were a record number of 1,700 members of the public responded to the questionnaire, asking for views on what they thought the council should be focusing its priorities and energies on in the future. Number of focus groups with businesses and other sectors of the community also took place, and the feedback from all of these was used to form the corporate plan, and I thank everybody for their input. At the February Council, we gave the go-ahead for a new draft local plan to be submitted to government. It's exciting. It's the way forward, and it's going to affect what happens in the district for many years ahead. I think we heard yesterday who the link person will be, who the inspector will be for our local plan as it goes through the process. It'll provide a clear direction for future development and create the right balance between protecting those parts of the district that are important in spatial or heritage terms, and we've got a lot of those, while accommodating growth to meet the housing needs of people, present and future residents, and space for businesses to ensure that we are a prosperous district going forward. There's a lot of work going into that, and obviously the town centre proposals are one of those for Kidderminster. The plan proposes to deliver just over 6,000 new houses over the period 2016 to 36, and 29 hectares of employment land. The documents include a number of statements of common ground which have been reached with neighbouring authorities and with key stakeholders. The financial landscape that I've referred to, faced by the authority and many other local authorities across the country, remains exceptionally challenging. In February, the administration's first medium-term financial strategy was approved at full council, and we're looking at the reviews of that at the moment. I would like to thank the hundreds of residents again who took time to comment and gave their views on our budget proposals. We believe our new financial strategy very much reflects what people told us. We are a listening council, and we want that to continue. During 2020, we've been faced with many unprecedented events, both across the district and nationally. The damage and destruction caused by flooding as a result of storms Ciara and Dennis, and the current coronavirus pandemic, to name but two. I'm very proud of the way that officers across the council have come together as a whole to continue to provide a first-class service to its residents and businesses across the district. I would particularly like to thank my cabinet and the Progressive Alliance colleagues for their support throughout the year. I also give my grateful thanks to the Chief Executive and the corporate leadership team for all the advice, support and guidance they continue to give me and other council colleagues. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ballinger. The next report is Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This is Councillor Hart.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I won't read it verbatim, but I will just touch on the salient points and pick up the point that it has felt rather strange being the new boy in this role, and somewhat of an amateur compared to my predecessor, who chaired the Overview and Scrutiny Committee before me for many, many years. And I think I said I feel a bit like a gamekeeper turned poacher. And as colleagues will know, but of course for the benefit of the members of the public watching us on YouTube, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee plays an important role and is politically balanced, and therefore made up of members of the Progressive Alliance administration, and indeed the only opposition group on the council, the Conservative group. And we have 10 members, and I'm grateful to my Vice Chairman, Councillor Chambers, also for keeping me in order. And we have considered a substantial number of reports this last 12 months, some 33 in all, and have held 7 meetings in public, but also 2 subcommittees to consider commercially restrictive and sensitive matters around acquisitions. I'd like to thank all members of the Scrutiny Committee for their commitment and dedication and their good humour and the spirit in which they debate matters, even though they may not always agree, and the way in which they forensically read reports and question the executive and indeed our executive officers. The overwhelming majority of matters that are considered are in fact unanimously agreed. And of course, this council has a rich history and an etiquette and a protocol where the overwhelming majority of matters go to scrutiny before they then go on to cabinet. And I'm grateful that is continuing. And I'm very grateful to the audience that I am always afforded at cabinet meetings to be able to present to the leader and the cabinet the views of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I also just want to briefly mention the issue of flooding, which again is later on the agenda. Who would have thought back in February what was to come, as if flooding in Bewdley wasn't bad enough. But of course, it simply wasn't practical in the early days of the lockdown, before we were all digitally connected to hold a meeting. And indeed, at the next meeting, there was only one item on the agenda, which would have been flooding. And of course, the very people that we would want to give evidence, police, fire, ambulance, are dealing with the pandemic emergency. Of course, we want the Environment Agency, and I suspect they're not quite as involved in the pandemic, but we would want all of our statutory partners and the voluntary community sector as well. And frankly, that is not simply practical at the moment, but as we move forward, I sincerely and certainly will be holding the June meeting, and hope that we can start the process of looking at the important issue of flooding. So I have had to cancel a few meetings due to lack of business. I frankly think there's no point bringing all members and officers to a meeting if there's no business to discuss. So I hope at some point we will get back to normal, whatever normal is in the future, the new normal in the municipal year 2021. And finally from me, may I take this opportunity to thank all of the many officers, whether they be in the corporate leadership team or not in the corporate leadership team, for coming to assist and present reports, and moreover to Sean Burford and Louisa Bright, our committee clerks, who keep us all in order. And I commend the report to council.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. The next report is Ethics and Standards Committee. Well, that's mine. So I shall call myself. The Ethics and Standards Committee has met once during the 2019 and 2020 municipal year. And I'm very pleased that we continue to work closely with the monitoring officer, independent persons and public to ensure that any conduct issues are dealt with as quickly as possible. The report is on page 71, and just a reminder that the Ethics and Standards Committee principally promotes and maintains or aims to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by councillors and co-opted members. So I move that report. I haven't seen any hands go up for any clarification or questions. Can you just confirm that, Mike?
Indeed, Chairman, nobody's indicated to speak.
Okay, in that case, I will take the reports en bloc and ask you to raise your hand again to show that you agree with those reports, so those reports are agreed.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Louisa, thank you. On to agenda item 13. This is the members' annual activity reports and attendance. Again, this is for noting. It's important actually to note that this appears to be the first occasion, I'm told, that all members have reported back with their attendances. So thank you very much on behalf of the council for doing that. Councillor Onslow is indicating.
Thank you, Chair. Can I comment on the activity reports and the attendance?
Yes, I think you can.
Thank you. Just a plea really on behalf of those of us who do attend functions and events through work in the evenings, that if we are going to change any dates for any meetings after they've been produced in the municipal calendar, if we can be given as much notice as possible. If we can't then attend, then it shouldn't then go against us in our attendance figures, because the case with the Members Forum in October, it was advertised as the 10th of October. It was then subsequently changed to the 17th of October at a much later date. I could never attend the 17th because I'd accepted an appointment at work. When the 10th was then cancelled, I accepted an appointment at work, and then we moved the Members Forum back to the 10th as well. So there was two, of which I could then attend neither. It's now in my figures and it shows that I didn't attend, which, you know, I'm not going to make a big deal about that. There's far more important things to worry about. But just really to say a plea that if we are going to change things, can we please have as much notice as possible? And should people then not be able to attend, that needs to be shown in their figures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Onslow. There are no other speakers on this, so can I again have a show of hands to show that those reports are agreed?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. On to agenda item 14. This is to consider an extension of the timetable for overview and scrutiny committee to report on flooding, and I call Councillor Hart.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. It's a busy night for the leader of the opposition tonight. Everyone, I'm sure, has read the report on page 74, and indeed I touched upon flooding both in the notice of motion and indeed when I presented my annual activity report as chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And can I say that, and indeed repeat, that who would have known when we unanimously agreed this notice of motion back at February Council, how what would have happened and how much we would have been hampered in being able to deliberate upon it at scrutiny because of the coronavirus pandemic. Clearly, I would like to think that we can start to consider this matter at our June meetings, and the report sets out at page 74 in paragraph 3 a proposal that council is invited to agree an extension to December 2020 to report back on the flooding issues. If possible, council will undertake the work and report back to September Council. I frankly think that it is likely to be December 2020 Council, which is in the formal recommendation. I won't say any more because I don't think it requires any lengthy debate, other than to simply formally move, Chairman, that we agree an extension to December 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. I do have one speaker, Councillor Khan Edgington White.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to be contentious in any way, shape or form. I thank the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, and I fully understand the reasons why things have had to move. However, I would like to propose an amendment tonight, and that is that the council agree an extension to September 2020 to the deadline for the committee to report back about flooding issues. I would further like to request that if there is any earlier relevant information available from the Environment Agency and any other bodies with regard to the flooding in Bewdley, that this is reported back to the full council in July 2020 as an interim report. The important thing is, for me, is the actual amendment of the date for the deadline for the committee to report back to be moved to September. That should be the official deadline, and I will explain why. In proposing this amendment to the motion, I acknowledge the work of our council and all the emergency services, and I understand we would wish to involve in an investigation all these services and the related issues for the February flooding. And I understand how tirelessly everyone is working for the current situation that is across the country, well, across the world. I'm also aware of the situation, however, of our Bells Corner residents in Bewdley who having been flooded in February, are now self-isolating in properties which are damp, requiring extensive remedial work, and living upstairs, or haven't even not been able to return to their properties since their evacuation in February. I would like to share with you feedback from a couple of emails I've had from these residents. I have got this information as I am part of the Bewdley Town Council flood group. And so we work with them quite closely and have been working with them over the last few months. Can I just say, I would be bringing this information to the council regardless of whether I was proposing an amendment or not. On the 1st of March 2020, an older vulnerable resident of Bells Corner said to me, or sent me an email that said, "We moved back in on Friday. This is the 29th of February 2020. We had all the PLP, which is the property level protection, installed. It all failed miserably. We had pumps, flood doors, air vents, outer wall protection. We still had 700 millimetres of water, flood water, in our downstairs rooms." A month later, on the 5th of May, she contacted me again. "I am still living upstairs." Bearing in mind this is now in a period of self-isolating. "I am still living upstairs. I have 4 neighbours who are still unable to return. I am waiting for the insurance company to say we are dry enough to start repairs. The builder is happy to start repairs, but he doesn't know if he can get materials. I can't believe the bad luck we're all having, but we are still all alive. I do hope we get the permanent barriers. I've lived here for 19 years. The second, very short email, feedback on the 7th of May, when asked if they were okay. It's a family living in one of the listed buildings that has not been progressed as far with the property level protection that the previous resident mentioned. In this email, she said, "Our work is progressing painfully slow." That is the work on remediation from the flooding. "Working from home and homeschooling. Neighbours are still in a hotel. As an authority, I am sure we are doing everything we can. I know we're doing everything we can to support these residents during the lockdown, as we did support them during the flooding. But to delay the report until December would mean that we could feasibly be in the throes of another flood event at Bewdley. In 2019-20, we had 4 flood events. The last one lasted 3 weeks. The first deployed barriers in Bewdley was at the end of October in 2019. And there were successive events in November, and then the February events that followed. I do know that the Environment Agency as a result of a conversation in the last 24 hours, I do know that the Environment Agency have a small dedicated team looking at the issues related to February flooding, and they are hoping to be able to get a newsletter and updates as to the issues and the way forward to residents and the community by the end of May, and therefore feel that once this is available, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, with the Chairman's agreement, could commence gathering evidence for this report. I appreciate talking to the emergency services and other partners may still take longer, but I would implore the Council to agree to moving this extension to September, not to December. Thank you.
Thank you. I know. Thank you, Councillor Edington-White. I know that Councillor Hart has indicated, but just for clarification, then you're asking for the date where it says December to be September 2020. Are you also then asking that any earlier, I've written this down as you've spoken, any earlier relevant information from the Environment Agency to be reported back by July to the Council in an interim report?
Thank you. Yes, Chairman, that's exactly.
To take it forward, I would need a seconder, I think. Nikki's come on my screen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to second this. I am mindful of what Marcus has said and reasons for his extension, but I'm also very mindful that as a council, we don't want to be reporting on something when we're actually maybe in the thick of floods again. So I just would like people's understanding on this one, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other speakers? Councillor Hart. So the Councillor Edington-White, which has been seconded, is to move the date to September 2020. What I've done is I've noted down what Councillor Edington-White then said, which was that any earlier relevant information from the Environment Agency to be reported back to Council by July in an interim report. It's over to you, Councillor Hart.
Thank you. I am slightly shocked and staggered would be a little bit of an understatement. And whilst I appreciate that Councillor Karen Edington-White has said that she didn't wish to be controversial, I was asked if I would move out of courtesy this report on page 74, very helpfully and kindly drafted by the Chief Executive, because effectively I don't control the council chamber. The Progressive Alliance have the command of the chamber, and this is a substantive recommendation which I was clearly under the impression that the leadership supported, and I have moved it out of courtesy as the chairman of the Scrutiny Committee. I think it would be exceptionally helpful if we were able to have some advice in respect of this matter, and also what the leader of the council's position is, because I do feel that I've done this to be exceptionally helpful, and now I'm unclear as to what the administration's position is, because I was left with the clear impression that this would just be approved and it had everyone's agreement.
Okay, in that case, Councillor Bellinger, did you want to comment?
Yeah, quite happy to, Chairman, respond to that. Yeah, this has only come up at our pre-meeting last night, and I'm quite honest about that. You know, this is not planned in advance, but colleague Councillor Edington-White made a very strong statement in view of why does it really not, and we discussed it at some length, and that's why she decided to put an amendment through which we will support. And there has been a lot of time on reflection. There's been a lot of time, Chairman, that this could have happened. Work could have started. We've all worked in. There've been a couple of meetings cancelled. There's no mention of flooding in the full report that's come through. I know that the Councillor Hart has mentioned it at some length tonight because he was probably aware that this was coming in as an amendment, because we did mention this to the officers earlier on in the afternoon. So you didn't. Well, that's reassuring. but certainly there are reasons that we believe it can be got on with. There's no need for it to hurry, no need for it to wait until December. If we set December, then it'll go on to March or April, and we'd have missed a whole year. And it is a crisis situation there now. We've heard from Councillor Mrs. Edgington White, and you know, at the end of the day, there is no reason, given the number of meetings that have been cancelled this year for a variety of reasons, why this could not have been done virtually. We don't feel, on consideration, that the whole of the sort of police and the whole of the ambulance service and everybody else and people who will be involved in this are going to be tied up in coronavirus issues and don't feel they're able to get on with the day-to-day running. We need to be on top of this now. There's a pending report coming out from the Environment Agency, and we just were surprised on reflection to see that we were talking about delaying it further. This was a motion that we passed at a previous council meeting back in February. We moved the motion. I know you amended it slightly, and that was mending something we were already proposing, overview and scrutiny, in the last part of that original motion. So, you know, to say now, well, it's been delayed, it's been this and this, that, we weren't happy with that. So it's quite reasonable, and we took advice. It was quite reasonable to move this as an amendment this evening, and I'm pleased my colleagues have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ballinger. I don't know whether the Chief Executive wishes to, because Councillor Hart mentioned the Chief Executive as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I start by apologising to Councillor Hart? He's quite right in pointing out that this paper was brought forward at my suggestion in wording which had been shared with other colleagues in advance of the agenda coming out, because it's only courteous that the council, having agreed at its meeting in February that it wanted a report by July, if that wasn't going to be feasible for very good practical reasons, it's only courteous that the council should be asked to agree an extended timeline. And I'll go on a bit further and explain that a lot of that work is going to have to be done by a very stretched team of individuals in the council, including me. You know, the last 8 weeks or more, you know, maybe even 12 weeks now, has been taken up entirely by emergency planning issues. First of all, in responding to the floods, and of course, more recently in dealing with the coronavirus situation. And there simply hasn't been time for me and others to do the sort of background research that would be necessary to pull together information. In any emergency situation, there's a huge flood, and I apologise for the pun, of information that flows backwards and forwards, emails, notes of meetings, and so on and so forth. And to do a reasonable job to assist the committee, it would take a huge amount of effort to trawl through that information and produce the sort of evidence base that would assist the committee in its work. And the other thing to bear in mind, it's only when this council met on the 21st of April that virtual meetings of any formal committee of the council became possible, and therefore, quite naturally, the Scrutiny Committee could not have started its work at any point after the lockdown started until Council had agreed the changes to its constitution that it discussed last time. So I would like to apologise to Councillor Hart that obviously he's had no forewarning of this amendment tonight. Obviously we will do our best, if Council now supports the amendment, to try to produce a report for July. But I do have to express concern about the impact on our capacity when we've got so many other things to be doing.
Okay, I'm minded. Are there any other, we do have some speakers. Tracy, Councillor Onslow, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. It was just if this work is going to involve other agencies, which I presume it is, like the police and the Environment Agency and you know, our fire colleagues, I think it's going to be difficult for this council to say what position they're going to be in, because they will have huge backlogs as frontline workers with. So it's just that caution really, Chair, that if this work is solely for the council to do, that's one thing. But if we're, and certainly, you know, looking at the police, they will have a huge backlog once all this clears up, and it clearly isn't anywhere near cleared up yet. So it was just a point. I don't think we can speak on behalf of other agencies as to what their workload will be like.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Onslow. Councillor Edington-White, I'm going to go, I think it's been seconded. Oh, Councillor Desmond has indicated now. Councillor White, I think I'd like to hear from Councillor Desmond first, and then I'll come back to you to summarise. And then because it's been seconded, it needs to go to Council for a vote. So Councillor Desmond.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I, like Councillor Hart, is exceptionally surprised at the amendment on the table this evening, and it's one of process, really, because obviously this agenda has been produced for a week. The leader and the cabinet, and certainly the leader, would have been aware of the agenda items in advance of last week when it was published. So the leader and the chief executive would have gone through each item in detail. And I would have thought that the logical time frame to get any changes to the agenda would have been with the chief executive crafting of the agenda, not necessarily on the day that we are debating this agenda item, that a change so fundamental as this is made. I suspect my view is it's too late in the day to make any changes. The chairman of this overview scrutiny acted in good faith, quite frankly, in acquiescing to putting the date back to December. I suspect on the advice and the rightful advice of the chief executive. To me, it seems like the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has been done up a gum tree, quite frankly, with this late amendment. I think the Progressive Alliance should have got their ducks in a row a lot earlier than the night before this very important meeting. We, the Conservative group, met a week in advance of this particular meeting, and we got our ducks in a row far earlier. So I think we need to heed the advice of the chief executive. He's the one who's going to be driving this very important scrutiny exercise with, his key officers. And if his advice, quite frankly, is that the time frame put forward by the amendment is too early to do it diligently and fully, then I think we have to respect that advice. So my advice to all members is, I think we should adhere to the printed version and in good faith adhere to the December deadline.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. Councillor Hardiman has indicated as well. That'll be the last speaker, because I'm not going to, Councillor Edington-White, I'm going to go back to Councillor Edington-White when to summarise. As process is concerned, because it's been seconded, it will have to go to a vote. Caroline, you're going to tell me otherwise.
Chairman, I just thought it may be helpful. We have an amendment on the table here. It is up to the mover of the original motion to decide whether he's able to accept it into the original. And I'm not quite sure whether we've got the view of the mover at this stage. So I would be grateful to hear from Councillor Hart again to see if there is a way through this. As you were.
Okay, so what I'll do, Councillor Hardiman will be the last speaker. Then I will go to Councillor Hart to see whether he can accept the amendments. If not, then Councillor Khan Edgington White, and then we'll go to a vote. So Councillor Hardiman is next.
Thank you, Chairman. A few of you will know that I'm actually the county councillor for Ribbon-Hall, where Beals Corner exists. And whilst I'm mindful of the concerns that Councillor Edgington White has, I have to say that we should read the report. And the second paragraph quite clearly says that there's no prospect at the present time of being able to progress this work when the efforts of all organisations are directed elsewhere. We've just heard endorsement of that and clarification from the Chief Executive. I'm sorry, Councillor Edgington White. I think this is too late in the day, and it doesn't seem that it's practicable to achieve this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hardiman. In line with what the solicitor has said, I'll go back to Councillor Hart to see whether he will agree to those amendments.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'm very grateful to the Chief Executive's wise words and setting the position straight. The way this has been dealt with by the Progressive Alliance has frankly been a disgrace and completely discourteous. I think Councillor Hart, sorry, I'm going to have to cut in, and therefore, Chairman, to answer the specific question, I'm not minded to take on board the amendment. So I think what we'll have to respectfully do is to take a vote on Councillor Khan Edgington White's amendment that was seconded by Councillor Martin, and see where Council goes with this, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Councillor Hart, I think it's not, it demeans your position to say that any member is being disgraceful when they have tabled an amendment, which is their democratic right to do. Now, I'm not going to get into that. I just think that you shouldn't use those sorts of words. I'm going to go back to Khan Edgington White. The democratic process is to then put it to a vote after that. So, Councillor Edgington White, briefly, please, if you would summarise your position.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a shame that, well, I'm not going to comment other than to say I was heartened when Councillor Hart said that this would be discussed at the June meeting. That was really encouraging. I want to clarify the situation regarding how much work I expect that Wyre Forest District Council would be undertaking to do this. I did say in my comments that I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I do not in any way, shape or form want this to be extra workload. What I do want is, knowing that the Environment Agency are moving forward locally, I want Wyre Forest to be on message with all of this, and seeing as their report comes out at the end of May, that we could work our way forward. I don't want shed loads of work being done by officers and reports that arrive on our desk that are very thorough and very detailed, but are already superseded by further flood events, which is very likely. That is the experience we have in Bewdley. We're in a different period of time with climate change, with predictions. All the predictions are out of the window at the moment because Bewdley is experiencing different situations. It's experienced a flash flood when we never normally have a flash flood. We have 48 hours warning. The goalposts are changing, and as such, I don't want the council, when I put my motion in February, the objective was to see if there was a case to be made for a permanent barrier and to get support from the government with the 5 billion funding that was promised, which we don't know now whether that will be there, but if it is still there, we need to be ready to be able to put our case. If Wyre Forest wants to support the residents, as I know they do, as the council I represent, I know you're all behind the residents, I know you're behind Bewdley on flooding issues, and we don't want to make this impossible to achieve. The idea of September is that it should be manageable. We don't have to have massive amount of detail because it's the Environment Agency and their feedback that will actually take priority over what happens next. I please implore the council to come together on this and say, yes, we will do what we can to be ready for consideration no later than September before there are any other instances of flooding. Let's put our backs into this, put our energy and enthusiasm into fighting for funding and a permanent barrier in Bewdley if it is feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edington-White. So members, we will go and vote on this for the amendments. So all those in favour of Councillor Edington-White's amendments, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, and all those against? Do you have the numbers, Louisa?
Yes, I counted 18 for and 11 against.
Thank you. Okay, so members, on to agenda item 15. This is the policy and budget framework.
Chairman, can I just intervene?
Yes.
The amended motion now becomes a substantive motion and would need to be voted on again, but we haven't actually had a seconder for the original motion, and because the amended motion has become the substantive motion, we need to go through the formal procedure.
Nikki Martin seconded.
Same substantive.
Could you confirm that, please, Chairman?
So the Councillor Martin seconded the amended.
Yes, Councillor Martin seconded the amendment. I don't think we had an amendment to the original motion, and
No,
now
we
the
didn't.
amended motion has become the substantive motion. We haven't had an original, a seconder, sorry, to the original motion.
Okay, could I have a seconder to the original motion?
I'm happy to second, Chairman. I'm happy to second, Chairman.
That's Councillor Desmond. Okay.
So now
okay.
the amended motion is a substantive motion that you need a second vote on.
Indeed, thank you, thank you. So we have some speakers. If we could go to the first speaker, please, Mike.
Yes, Councillor Helen Dyke.
Apologies, Chairman and Council. I was indicating to speak on agenda item 15A.
My fault.
Chairman,
next speaker.
Councillor Hart, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wishful thinking that we get to the next agenda item, Councillor Dyke. Of course, now that the amendment has been carried and the original motion as tabled on page 74 has been defeated, it seems frankly churlish not to agree, because that's clearly now the democratic will of council. Can I just say, Chairman, that I will of course use my best endeavours to ensure that we can get a report in September. We have a June and July meeting. I suspect, of course, that locus and quos may be more difficult, but if we need them, then we will certainly have them. And indeed, we may very well have to meet a little bit more, whether virtually or in person, between now and indeed September. But certainly we will bring some form of a report back in September, because that's clearly going to be the democratic will of council. But I do stress that it will, I think, stretch our chief executive and officers who will be working on this. and we may have to come back for a further extension. But certainly as chairman, I will certainly do my best to execute the democratic will of the majority.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Councillor Edington-White has indicated again. So very briefly, Councillor Edington-White.
Just to thank the chairman, chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, and I would hope, Councillor Hart, that at the June meeting, we could actually, or you could lead us through how we can do this effectively without actually putting too big a workload on our members. And I thank you for conceding that we will attempt to get something to council by September. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other speakers, in which case we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And do you have the numbers, Louisa?
Yes, with the exception of Tracy, everybody was in favour.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Caroline, for your help on that. So we finally move to agenda item 15. Councillor Oborski.
Thank you. Yes, the recommendation, because there may be members of the public without copies of the agenda, it's the town centre acquisition strategy, and the recommendation is that we approve an amendment to the capital programme for a future high street property acquisition fund of £4.275 million to be funded from external grant and to be conditional on award of such grant. So basically, we are asking to amend the capital programme by an additional £4.275 million, but only if we get given access to that £4.275 million by external grant. We are not intending to spend that money if we don't get the grant. I so move.
Thank you. Councillor Ballinger.
What we could do with that money. Thank you.
We didn't hear you, Councillor Ballinger. You were on mute.
I was on mute. Oh, well.
You've gone back on mute.
I haven't touched anything. Have you got it now?
Yes, yes.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I'm seconding that and pleased and hope that we are successful with our bid. It's going to be very useful cash we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please, Mike.
Councillor Helen Dyke.
Thank you. I must apologise to council at this point, and I hope they accept my apologies and apologise to members of the public. I should have declared under declaration of interest at the beginning of this meeting that I've taken no part in this work in my cabinet role, and I won't be taking any part in the vote this evening. I do actually work in the town centre, not sure what impact or effect that may have in the future. So I will not be voting on this item.
Thank you very much. I thought for a moment you were going to tell us that you own the town centre, but next speaker, please, Mike.
Chairman, the solicitors indicated, but Councillor Hart is the next member speaker.
Okay. Caroline?
Yes, thank you for that declaration. Councillor Dyke, if you could leave us for the item having declared a DPI, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I will try my best.
Okay. Are we able to tell whether or not Councillor Dyke is left? Can you tell, Mike, whether she's left?
Yes, I can, Chairman. She's on hold.
Thank you. Next speaker then, please, Mike.
Is Councillor Hart, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'll be brief. Philip Hammond if anybody can remember who he was now, launched the Future High Streets Fund and the national pot of £675 million. And Mike Parker and his team, now led by OzTAP, have done a fantastic job hitherto on all of the work that has been done for bids to the Future High Street Fund to get us to this stage. I actually think that we have a fantastic bid in and a fantastic proposal. We've already seen, with as a result of a decision that a previous council took when I was leader, that we have invested in the public realm and infrastructure in Worcester Street together with the County Council, and leveraged substantial sum from the GBS LEP. Let's hope that we are successful with this acquisition fund, and that we can invest in our town centre and shape it for the next generation, and that, notwithstanding coronavirus and notwithstanding that things are going to be even harder in retail and in town centres, we can shape it into a centre where our communities can see vibrant activity, whether that be houses, shops, restaurants, cafes, open space, places to meet, a combination of all of the above. And this is certainly something that will receive support from the Conservative group, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Borski, Chairman.
Councillor
Thank you.
Borski to summarise, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Councillor Hart for those comments. Yes, OzTAP and Mike Parker have led an absolutely fantastic team on this. We have some really, really exciting proposals that can change the face and make the face of Kidderminster for well into the future. We're not talking about something for the next couple of years. We're talking about something that will really make magnificent change to Kidderminster for the next couple of generations, probably. It's really exciting time. And we all hope that we are successful. It's a really good bid. It's a really exciting bid. We're very grateful to the previous Chancellor of the Exchequer for actually bringing this in. And hopefully this is a really exciting future for Kidderminster. I hope it's going to be a unanimous vote.
Thank you. We will, well, the recommendations are on page 75. If you agree with those recommendations, could you please vote by raising your hand? Okay, Louisa.
Unfortunately, Louisa's connection has gone, Chairman. I'm just seeing if our backup's on board. Sean, are you there?
That's Tracy Onslow, who appears to have left the meeting.
Right. So shall we take that vote again? Is Louisa back on?
It's unanimous, Chair, apart from Tracy, who appears to have left the meeting.
Okay, it's unanimous. Councillor Onslow appears to have left the meeting. Thank you. Is there any way of getting Councillor Dyke back?
Yes, I'm doing that, Chairman.
I've invited Councillor Dyke back to the meeting, Chairman.
Okay, we'll just wait a moment. I mean, there isn't anything else really.
She's back with us, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda items 16, 17 and 18. There aren't any other business to consider. Perhaps the solicitor to the council will confirm that. Is there any other
Confirmed.
business? Confirmed. Thank you. So, members, that's it. I will close the meeting at 7:43. Stay safe and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.